Hi everybody, it's Thomas here from Thomas Fitzgerald Photography. Welcome back to the channel. And today we are going to look at processing some cityscape images in Capture One. So a while ago I was in New York City and we spent an evening in Brooklyn down by the river and got some interesting images as well as some other shots around the city that I want to process. So I'm going to be using Capture One for these. So let's see how we get on. Okay, so I'm going to start with this one here, and this was evening time down by the Hudson, or sorry, the East River, and you have the shot of the Brooklyn Bridge and the ferry underneath in the water, and this is kind of what it looked like, but I think we can do better than this. As you can see, it's quite dull and dark. I was shooting to protect the sky a bit, so that's why everything is kind of dark. Anyway, let's get into this quickly. So I'm going to start with some basic stuff and then we'll kind of build upon it. So the usual things here, we're going to bring up the shadow details. We don't want to bring them up too much because we kind of want the moodiness of this. And we're going to add a bit of contrast as well. And I'm going to bump up the saturation slightly. I don't want to bring it up too much, but just a little. And then I'm going to bring the blacks back down slightly. So again, I'm going to keep bringing up the shadows. And maybe bring the blacks back down, and straight away that's much better. But one thing I've noticed is that this image is in fact not straight, so let's just fix that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to aim to straighten it based on the horizon in the background. So we got straight across here. Okay, so that's much better straight away, but it's still lacking a bit of drama. So what I'm going to do is I want to bring up the sky a bit, so I'm going to do that by adding a gradient. So we click on the gradient tool, draw our gradient like so, and we can tweak this a bit afterwards. And I'm going to start bringing down the highlights, and I'll probably bring down the exposure as well, and maybe bring up the contrast and the saturation. Actually, we can keep this fairly dramatic, so we don't have to worry too much about overdoing it. Maybe just bring that back up slightly. Actually, no, we'll bring it down. We can kind of just play around with the positioning of this. So if I look at my before and after, so there's before and after, and straight away, that's already much better, but I think we can get it even better still. So, let me see. What I might try and do is just kind of add a little bit more purple into the sky. So I'll just try this. Just a tiny bit. Using the color balance tool, so that's actually not bad, and kind of want to frame this a bit better as well, so I'm going to do a little bit of vignetting. So I'm just going to go back to my background layer and go down to vignette, and we'll just drop this down a little tiny bit. Okay, so again we'll do a before and after. So there's before and there's after, and as you can see that is much better. However, we're kind of losing the boat here, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create another new layer. And this time we're going to go new empty adjustment layer, and then we'll select our paintbrush, and we're just going to roughly draw over this. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like so. Okay, and then we are going to start by just bringing up the shadows. And then we don't want to raise the blacks too much, so we can drop them back down. And then we can always go back over this and kind of tweak the mask a bit. So maybe make sure we get that, and then we don't want too much of the background, so we can just kind of erase it. And that's not bad. We get away with it because it's kind of spraying stuff coming up here. So there's without the mask and there's with the mask. So it doesn't actually need too much. You just kind of want to bring it up so you can actually see the boat. We could do a few other things here, so I'm going to add another layer. And this time I'm going to paint over the bridge, because we'll see if we can bring up some details on the bridge itself. So again, my wonderfully bad drawing skills here. And I'm just going to bring up the shadow of the bridge. We just kind of want to bring up some of the highlight details, and there's too much over here, so we're just going to erase that. We can actually feather our mask. If we do this, you can see we can just blur the mask, which is something I really wish Adobe would add to Lightroom. Okay, so that's we've brought up our bridge just slightly there. It's not a huge amount, but it's just enough to kind of bring in some details. This is going to get messy now, so what I'm going to do is quickly just name my layers. So bridge, and I think this is sky, and this was boat. Okay, so there's one last thing I want to do, and that's going to be another layer. So just one more empty jar, and this time I'll actually use the gradient for this. So what I want to do is just bring up some of the detail in the water. So if we go down, we find our clarity. Ooh, come nip, and just increase some of the clarity just a little bit. Okay, so there we have it. So there is before. There is after. I'm just going to do one more thing. Anybody who's followed my videos in the past knows when I say there we have it, that usually means I'm not actually finished. I'm going to add a bit of clarity to the sky, and I'm just going to try a little bit of dehaze in the sky, because sometimes that can add some oomph. Yeah, there we have it. And some people probably won't like that level of drama in the sky, but I kind of like it. So there's before and there's after. Okay, this time we're done. Okay, so that's that image. Let's move on and have a quick look at another one. I have this image here. This is just kind of further down the waterfront, and again, the same kind of issues here. It's fairly flat and quite dull. You can't really see any of the buildings because we had kind of the bright light in the sky was kind of thrown the exposure, and we don't want to clip the sky, so we kind of have to go with that. But this is again quite an easy fix. Yeah, so we're going to start with the basics again. So we bring up the shadows, bring up the contrast, and bring down the black slightly, and then we kind of keep, it's kind of a fine balance here between the shadows and the blacks. And then we can bring down the highlights as well, so we get some of the detail back in the sky. We're going to fix the sky with a separate layer in a minute. Okay, and then we'll add some clarity to the whole lot of this actually, and maybe change that to punch. That kind of works. Bring up the shadows a little bit more, and again bring up the saturation slightly, and even straight away that's not bad. We can tweak the white balance a little bit as well, just bring some warmth into it. Okay, so that's not bad, but what we want to do is kind of again add some more drama to the sky, and in fact drama to the whole image. So this time what we're going to do is I'm going to use the radial gradient tool, and we're going to drag out a radial gradient like so, make it a bit bigger. Okay, and we may need to invert this. No, we don't. Okay, so we'll just bring down the exposure and bring up the contrast. Actually, might need to bring in the feathering on that a bit, like so. Okay, so I mean straight away that's much better. There we go, and we can actually maybe bring up the shadows a bit, and we can add a little bit more clarity here. We don't want to go too much, and a bit of dehaze, because that always kind of adds some oomph as well. Oomph being the technical term. Okay, and again I'm going to add a little bit of purple to this, just a tiny bit in the highlights. Okay, so that's not bad, but you can see our city's still kind of dull, so what I might do is add another layer, and this time we'll just brush over the city. It doesn't have to be perfect because we're going to use shadow on this, so just do something like this. Okay, and we scroll back up, and we want to just bring up the shadows a bit more. And that's not bad even like that. That's actually pretty good. So there is before and there is after, and I think that is pretty good. Don't really think there's much more we can do to that. You could add maybe a little bit of vignetting, just kind of enhance that on top of the one we already have with the radial. In one of my previous videos somebody complained that I use vignette way too much, and they're probably right, but I kind of like a good vignette. Okay, so that's not too bad. Okay, I think we'll go with that. Right, on to the next image. This one's a bit trickier. So we have this fairly iconic shot of Dumbo here. So when I took this again, we were kind of the sun was still going down. Dumbo's quite chaotic. You don't often see that from the photos of it because everybody manages to picture it with a kind of a nice clean streets, but there's like tourists everywhere, so everyone kind of jostling. This isn't a brilliant photo, but I think we can actually do some good stuff with it. I was kind of trying to fit in between the crowds. I'm not going to fix the crop on this yet. As you can see, it's a bit off. We want to actually, I'm going to use perspective correction on this. So pop over to the shape tool and we'll just do vertical and then hit auto and see what happens. Oh, that actually fixed it. Okay, so now we just want to adjust the crop because that's a bit much. So I'm going to bring it down a bit so we'll bring in some of the cars. Just maybe kind of even that up a bit. That's not too bad, we'll go with that. Okay, so now we want to kind of do our main adjustments. So I'm going to start by bringing up the shadows. And we'll add some clarity, and already that's looking better. Maybe some contrast as well. We kind of want to emphasize the fact that there's kind of evening sun going on here, so I will bring up the temperature, make it a bit warmer. Okay, that's not bad. So what I am going to do next is we're going to add a gradient for the sky to fix the sky, and we'll bring down our highlights, maybe bring down the exposure slightly, and then we're going to bring up the shadows so it kind of compensates for that. And we will add a little bit more clarity, so maybe a little bit of dehaze as well. We just want to bring some details back into the sky, and then I'm going to add more purple to it, like we did with the other images, and that's not bad. It's actually, I'm probably darkening the sky a bit much there now. Maybe if I increase the contrast, I'm gonna bring that. Yeah, that's better. Maybe that's too much. When you're tweaking this, you kind of sometimes just have to kind of go back and forward until you get it right. I've done, here's one I made earlier, so kind of, this is what I'm going for. I think I've gone too far with the white balance, so I'm just going to dial that back. And I think I'm going to add a little bit of blue into the shadows over the whole thing, and yeah, that kind of fixes it a bit. So we're going to add a little bit of vignette, and straight away that's much better. So there's before, there's after. And the only thing is, again, we're kind of losing some of the details of the bridge, so I'm going to add another layer, and we'll just kind of roughly paint over the bridge. One of the things, if you've never been there and you've seen this scene in movies and whatnot, one of the things that doesn't really come across is just how loud this is. Like, the trains going over this bridge are so loud. It's just this constant clatter while you're there. Anyway, so I'm getting distracted. We've painted over that, so we're just going to bring up the shadows to bring some of that detail back in. And maybe just bring the highlights down a smidgen as well. So there we go. And that's much better. Okay, so again, before and after. That's not bad. One of the things you could do as well is, let me just try, is I'm going to add another adjustment layer. I'm just going to paint over the bottom here. And all I'm going to do is just darken this down so that we're not paying attention to them as much. Okay, so I have one more image that I want to do, and this one is even more tricky. Okay, it's actually not. It's actually quite simple. So we have this shot here of the Brooklyn Library, which is a cool building. Unfortunately, there's lots of construction work going on in front of it because they're redoing the roads. But I kind of still wanted to capture this building. It wouldn't fit into the frame with my 24mm equivalent lens, so I did some shots to make a panorama. So I'm going to select all these and then go stitch to panorama and just give this a second. Okay, so you can try different options with this. You can go perspective, which is maybe a bit much, although we do have some nice straight lines here, but we're going to have to crop a lot of this. And then cylindrical is probably going to be wrong because everything will be off. I mean, that kind of works as well if you want a dramatic effect, but I'm actually going to go with perspective because I think it actually works better. So stitch. Okay, so we have done our panorama and you can see it's quite distorted. So the first thing we need to do is crop it. So change to unconstrained to ratio and bring this in. Some of the building, I want to kind of go, maybe we'll just actually set this to square. But am I losing too much if I do this? It's not too bad, we just need to straighten it. So quick tip for straightening, if you've got an image where you've got a lot of strong perspective lines in it, and there's nothing there's no horizon or anything, the best way I find to make sure your image is straight is to look for a straight vertical near the center of frame and straighten on that. So again, so here in this case we just use the edge of the building, and if we go with that, our image should look pretty straight, like so. Okay, so on to the editing. What I want to do is I actually want to make this kind of a black and white and go for a kind of an old-timey look, because the building itself has a very kind of classic New York feel to it, even though it's probably not. It's probably much. I don't know actually any of the history of this building. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it black and white, and I'm going to use one of my presets. And I know someone's going to give out to me for doing that, but I will explain what the preset does. So we're going to go to custom styles, and I'm using T-Pan, and I'll have a link to T-Pan in the description below. Now, I did this earlier, and I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was that one. Okay, we'll go with that for the moment. And then we need to pop back over here, and I'm just going to drop the highlights down a bit. And if you look in black and white, you can see we have black and white enabled, and we want to lower down the blues because we want to darken the sky. Okay, so basically T-Pan is, we've got your black and white conversion, and then there's some curves going on. So if you look at the curves here, we're kind of raising the black levels and lowering the white slightly, just to kind of give that ever so slightly faded look you sometimes get with film. And then there's a few other tweaks, such as levels, and then obviously this, and then there's some clarity. We can actually go with a negative clarity too, just to kind of give it a little kind of glow, which also works. And then we can add some vignetting, and that's not bad. I might actually bring up the shadow a bit more. I'm hoping to kind of keep some of the strong shadows here, but I also don't want to lose too much of the detail, so it's a fine balance you have to strike. So if we're going to film grain, you can see I have that way too high. So if we zoom in, we can have a look. Yeah, that looks pretty good. What I might do is just go back and actually tweak the curve. So I'm going to go over to the Luma curve and just tweak that a bit more. Maybe. That's not bad. If we check before and after, so there's our before and there's our after, and I think that kind of works. Still losing a bit of detail here, so I might bring the whites down. Yes, that's better. Now, in an ideal world, none of this construction would be here. I could attempt to fix it in Photoshop, but that's a lot of effort. But seeing as we're here, this will be entertaining. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop Beta, and we're using this because we're going to see if generative fill can get rid of all this. Okay, so we want to select around this reasonably well. I don't have a high confidence that this is going to work, but we'll give it a go. Okay, yeah, we know. Generative fill, generate. Ooh. It's not perfect, but it works. I mean, you could go with that. It is kind of, we are losing it a bit over there. Probably needed to be more careful with that. Yeah, no, we're not going to go with this. We'll keep it for what it is, which is a snapshot in time, which is kind of what we're going for. But that just goes to show you what you can do. Anyway, back to Capture One. A slight little detour there. This is turning out more like a podcast where somebody's just rambling. Anyway, so there we have it. There are 4 images from start to finish, and yep, that's pretty much it. That's how I go about editing cityscape images in Capture One. If you like this tutorial, you would like more of this kind of thing, just let me know in the comments below. And thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.